Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest blow to the UK's economic prospects, where the blame is being laid squarely at the feet of the frankly incompetent Tory government and their quite insane Brexit strategy. But first, if you'd like to receive notifications of further uploads, then please click the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. So, news was emerging this weekend that Moody's, who are one of the top ratings agencies, has warned that the UK's credit rating will be downgraded if the government fail to obtain full access to the single market with any EU deal post-Brexit. So what I'm going to be discussing is why this is and what is the relevance of our credit rating for the economy. So the first thing to note is what the credit rating represents. It's basically the confidence amongst investors who wish to invest in a particular country or their currency and in a way that will pay them a reliable return. That's what investors want. They want the maximum return for their money, as anyone would who is investing their money. So things that would inevitably shake such confidence would be volatile markets, uncertain government policies, and defaulting on debts. All things that hardline Brexiteers say they want the government to do. Now, some of those hardliners are now in government. That makes it a little bit more worrying. Now, taking the country out of the EU and then taking us out of the single market at the end of the transition period would create volatile markets. Some goods would not be able to be traded between the UK and other countries at all. And when I say other countries, I mean most other countries, because remember, it's not just trading with the EU. We have a lot of agreements with other countries as a member of the EU that we lose the second we are not. And, well, we've had several years to try and replicate those agreements, and we've managed it with just a handful of nations that accounts for a few percent of our trade. And so what's the prospect of us getting all the rest in the year? None. So that's one aspect of it. There would then be some goods that would just take too long. They could be traded because the standards are fine, but it would just take too long for the buyer. So it's no good, like fresh food, for example. And some may be able to be transported fine. It doesn't need to get there in a hurry and it's okay. Now, in this event, customers would have to rush to find new supplies in the event that the goods can't be traded to them at all, or it would take too long to get there. British businesses would go under, UK tax receipts would plummet, and government expenditure would have to increase as lots of people lose their incomes. It's exactly the same scenario as David Cameron and George Osborne instigated. And the economy would, of course, tank. Not good news for an investor in sterling, for example. Then there's those uncertain policies. Now, Boris Johnson says he wants a comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU. Great. Some people believe that. But his stated Brexit strategy makes that outcome quite impossible. It's literally like someone saying they're going to sail across the Atlantic. Oh, that sounds interesting, you say. But then they tell you that they're going to do it on an inflatable raft with a tea towel. You think. Not quite sure about that. And given that Johnson's government are constantly contradicting themselves on all of their post-Brexit plans, it's clear that their real intentions are not what their stated intentions are. And when a government isn't honest about their policies, investors have no idea how to predict the lay of the land over the next few years, much less the next decade. Finally, defaulting on debts, something that surely no sane government would do for political purposes, but this is just what the hardliners are pressuring us to do. Granted, I do not believe that Johnson would. After all, he willingly gave up billions of pounds of the UK's money in European banks as part of his altered withdrawal agreement. Now, and that's the UK's money. Theresa May didn't give that up. This is just Boris Johnson. And if he's willing to give up so much of the UK's money that is actually the UK's and should come to us once we leave the EU, you'd hardly think he's going to default on our actual debts. But again, the language that comes out of Johnson and his cabinet is not always encouraging. It just has to be hoped that it is a bluff, like his threat to defy the courts, for example. And if the UK did default, then trust in us is obliterated and investors would be unwilling to bet their money on us. After all, what if we defaulted on their dividends? And some countries have. And this is the importance of the announcement about credit rating. Moody's are not warning us of the consequences they will impose if we leave the single market. It's not up to them exactly what our credit rating should be. It's based on investor confidence. It's much like a scientist. They're not deciding that climate change is a thing. It's just that's the way the data points. It will be investors that express that confidence by investing more, the same, or less than now in us. And what Moody's are saying, because it's bleeding obvious, is that if we do not get full access to the single market, then the British economy will suffer along the mechanism that I've already described. This means the pound will lose value. Well, only a fool invests in stock that they know is going to depreciate in value. So they won't, of course. You only buy it when it's depreciated in the expectation that it will appreciate later. So fewer people will want to invest, the value goes down, which means the credit rating goes down. It should also be noted that we already lost the top rating with this Conservative government. We used to have the AAA rating, the top rating, and we had it since 1978 continuously up to 2013, when of course David Cameron and George Osborne had done so much damage to the economy that we lost it. And that's what often irks me, being honest. Even people who sort of say they want to vote for Labour policies believe the lie that the Conservatives are the party of economic stability and fiscal prudence, and that Labour are just tax and spend. It was a Labour government that gained the AAA rating in the first place. It was Labour that maintained it. Even the global crash that damaged our economy that happened during a Labour government, well, didn't harm the rating while Labour were dealing with it. We lost it 3 years into Cameron's premiership because he and his chump of a chancellor, who'd had time by then to sail us into clearer waters, didn't have any interest in continuing Labour's work in nursing the economy out of those issues. The Conservatives' only concern is the bank balance of the wealthy elite, not the general health of the economy. The United Kingdom is a resource for them to be tapped and bled dry for their own profit. And the same thing is happening again. In the intervening 7 years, nearly since we were downgraded, there has never been any danger of us regaining that top level rating. Investor confidence never recovered as Cameron and Osborne continued to squander the UK's potential and then plumbed even greater depths by triggering a brainless exit from the EU, before they promptly exited themselves to avoid taking the blame. Let some other mug carry the can, they said. Theresa and Boris can fight over this poisoned chalice we've left them. But back to Moody's, and there's still a risk to us of a further downgrade, even if we haven't quite left the single market yet. As I said, the decisions are not really a judgment, it's an observation of investor confidence. It's investors who really determine credit rating. Ratings agencies are collecting the data and providing a conclusion based on how investors would behave. The second factor that could see us downgraded is if it transpires, they said, that Brexit in general has shaken confidence in Britain's fiscal policy. I mean, we've had scores of businesses all leave the UK for elsewhere. Now, this sometimes happens at any time. The odd business and the occasional British business will go under if it fails to adapt to changing markets, yeah. But a ridiculous number of both British and foreign businesses have either folded or moved out or announced that they're definitely moving out. Way more than any other time. You know, Brexit in many ways is a bit like man-made climate change. We can't point at a hurricane and say, that's our fault. We can't point to the floods that have been happening in the region around where I live this week and say, that's climate change. But what we can say is the increased regularity and ferocity of these weather events is. And it's much like this with the businesses. There's just so many, and it's been so devastating and so quick that businesses have gone from profitability to disaster that it's obvious. Except in our case, there are plenty of businesses where we can say it's directly related to Brexit. And if anyone were in any doubt about the economic impact of Brexit, a country's rating isn't just the rating itself. It also has a direction, an outlook for the future. So just before the referendum, the outlook was classed as stable. So that meant it wasn't in any danger of regaining the AAA, otherwise the outlook would have been positive, but it was at least not going to slide further down. That's the level at which it was at. Now enter the Brexit referendum result, and the outlook was made negative the very next day. Moody's are essentially saying what businesses and individual top economists have been saying, that leaving access to the single market will be detrimental to the UK's economic prospects. And that's all this warning is about now. It's a warning that Boris Johnson's plans will see the British economy become an even poorer prospect for investors than Cameron and Osborne rendered it. Of course, the UK government attacked this statement. They're essentially asking us to believe that self-serving government ministers with no relevant qualifications or experience between them to decry the economic facts from top economists, many of whom have won a Nobel Prize in their field. And they're asking us to believe the uneducated and inexperienced clowns against a background of nearly 10 years of economic gloom whilst under this Conservative government. Even the Conservatives can't try and say that the economy is booming under them. No, I don't think I'm going to believe that. There are many reasons for opposing Brexit and voting along those lines in this upcoming general election. And I'll be covering more of those reasons over the next week and doubtless over the next month. But this is something that every voter should be taken seriously because it affects each and every one of us. Political ideas aside, every one of us very profoundly. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, then don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for further details. And until next time, I'll see you later.